Hi everyone, welcome to Miss Adams Teaches Poetry. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at War Photographer by Carole Satyamurti. This is not the same poem as War Photographer by Caroline Duffy. Totally different poem, although similar subject. This is the poem that is part of the Edexcel Conflict anthology. I do have another video on the other War Photographer, so do have a look if you need to. This video is going to take you through 5 key moments from the poem. I'm going to be looking at analysing features of language and structure and form in particular. If you would like some more information about context and a bit of a deep dive on form, have a little look at my playlist and you'll find a video to help you there. But for now, get your flashcards and let's get started. Okay, let's start with the very beginning, the reassurance of the frame is flexible. One interesting start to the poem. So obviously this is, the frame is the photographic frame. And the idea of it offering reassurance is about, it captures an image, but then there's this juxtaposition created in the fricative alliteration of the frame is flexible, because it's actually saying, well, it's not necessarily that reassuring because it's flexible, it can change. So that adjective flexible suggests that really there's a sense of duplicity in camera images, in photographic images. And then the rest of this stanza sort of explains that. Note that we move into direct address. You can think that just outside it, so outside this frame, people eat, sleep, love normally. So we've got a triad here, and all of the behaviours, these verbs that have been given to us, eating, sleeping, loving, they're all just the sort of standard parts of our lives, aren't they? That's, we eat every day, we sleep, we have loving relationships. That adverb of manner normally is really interesting because it juxtaposes what the photographer does, while I seek out the tragic, the absurd to make a subject. So it's like he's saying that as the photographer, he sits outside the realm of normality. He just captures what is there. Now, I think it's interesting, the verbs that Satyamurti has chosen to use here, while I seek out and to make a subject, it suggests that there's a sort of calculation here. He's seeking out the tragic, i.e. there's a suggestion that there is a moral issue here, that someone is benefiting from the tragedy and from the suffering or the ridiculousness even of others. So it's quite an interesting start to the poem. And then Satyamurti goes on to give some examples of what the photographer will capture. So the first example we're given is introduced through this adverbial as when at Ascot once. So this one time. Now Ascot is a place that is traditionally associated with wealth. It's where you go to see the horse racing. It's where, it's where the racing takes place. But it has always been associated with the sort of upper class. So as when at Ascot once, I took a pair of peach sun-gilded girls rolling silk crumpled on the grass in champagne giggles. Now we've got this metaphor of the sun-gilded girls, the fact that they're sort of peach, and we've got this colour symbolism as well, and it's all to do with highlighting wealth. And then we also have items that are associated with wealth. So we've got the idea of silk, we've got champagne, all tied in with Ascot. So this is an image, a taken image of luxury and wealth and happiness and being kind of carefree, and the wealth is emphasized by the fact that their silk dresses are all crumpled. It doesn't even matter that to them. They're rolling around on the grass, drinking champagne. It sounds marvelous and carefree. But this is a snapshot of a life. Whatever happens around it, we don't know. And then this is juxtaposed with the next stanza, which starts with a repeated structure, as last week. So we've now got these two moments, and he's basically saying that what he's doing is the same. He's seeking out the tragic or the absurd, just as he was at Ascot and just as he was last week. Notice how specific that adverbial of time is there. As last week, when I followed, note the verb again, almost some people could read it as being like predatory, as in out to benefit from the suffering others. Some people might just read it as following the story. That's up to you. But when I followed a small girl staggering down some devastated street. Okay, so we've got the small girl. So we've got, obviously everything is juxtaposed from the first stanza, but you get the idea that the women in the previous stanza are, or the girls in the previous stanza are full of life and energy, whereas this girl is burdened, and her youth is emphasized by that adjective small. The verb staggering demonstrates the hardship that she is suffering. And then we've got this personified image, the devastated street, but not just any, not a specific devastated street, sorry, the indefinite determinate some. It's just some devastated street, i.e. it could be any of them, they're all devastated. Note the way that the personification is like transferring the emotions of the people, like the people are devastated. And we've got this little girl, her hip thrust out under a baby's weight. So we're getting this image of hardship again in this small child looking after a baby. We don't know what the connection is at this point. And then we've got this, I'm never really sure how to say this word, polyptoton, not sure, but that's how it's spelled anyway, where you repeat a word but in its different kind of grammatical forms. So saw and seeing, she saw me seeing her. There's a really interesting balance here, you know, with the verb and the pronoun. So it's like she's watching him watching her. Again, it draws attention to the fact that him taking this photo feels uncomfortable, you know, that he is potentially benefiting from the suffering of others. The other interpretation, of course, is that he's just there cataloguing it because people need to understand about the suffering of the world. I think as well that my finger pressed, it's like he's ready to go. He's ready to take that moment, take that photo. And then we move into the tragedy of this poem. So he describes, I'm sorry, I know I meant to be doing 5 key quotes and then I chuck in other little bits, but it's important for you to see the context of these lines. So this is what happens after the first bomb of the morning has shattered the stone. So note here, it's the first bomb. Okay, so this determiner here is telling us that there's going to be a lot more. So we're being reminded of the kind of routine nature of this violence, of this suffering. But that doesn't make it any less terrifying, because instinct prevailing, so that kind of the human instinct to protect yourself, she drops her burden. Now that metaphor, the burden, is a metaphor for that baby. So she drops the child onto the ground, and mouth too small for her dark scream began to run. So this metaphor of the dark scream, the way that it's been embedded into the line, and mouth too small for her dark scream began to run, and it almost mirrors how little time there is. So this idea about her scream, this dark, terrifying scream, is just sort of squeezed in, you know, to the line before this sort of enjambment here. And obviously, again, we've got the imagery that is reminding us and accentuating her youth, the fact that her mouth is too small. And then the final part of the poem is where we get the real kind of message, and it goes back to the beginning, this idea of the frame being flexible, the reassurance of the frame being flexible, because now we move on to the fact that this image that he's taken, so he took the photo, you know, that my finger pressed just before the bomb hit. It was that moment where there's a baby, a girl holding a baby. And it describes how in this picture, this moment that he captured just before the bomb went off, showed the little mother, the almost smile. Now, the almost smile, I like the way that that's been turned into a compound noun, like making it a sort of a traditional image in itself. The almost smile could be that sort of moment of recognition of the man, or the person, sorry, I don't know why I'm making the wall photographer male. It could be that kind of recognition, or it could just be the way that her mouth was just moving in that second. But the point is that where this is published, the quotation, or the caption I should say, under the picture is, "Even in hell, the human spirit triumphs over all." So the caption, which is so emotive, with this personification of how the human spirit wins, like, look at this, it's a hellscape, but we've got this smiling mother, the human spirit, and so it's taking away the reality of the situation, that actually seconds later she dropped the baby and ran away. And so that is this bit here. It's like the counter to the quotation, sorry, to the caption. I keep saying quotation. It's the counter to the caption. And you can see that in the way that Satyamurti repeats those emotive images. But hell, like heaven, is untidy. Its boundaries arbitrary as a bloodstain on a wall. And this is so important, because what we have here is a paradoxical simile, because we've got the antithesis, haven't we, between hell and heaven. That's kind of what it makes it paradoxical, because she's saying heaven is untidy just as hell is untidy. And then Satyamurti describes what she means by this untidiness, that almost like, so the boundaries are as arbitrary as a blood stain on a wall. So the boundaries of hell are movable, and so the darkness kind of seeps everywhere. Arbitrary means based on a random choice, or it's like a whim. So she's basically saying that this kind of suffering and pain is as random as blood on a wall in a war-torn area, i.e. pointing out just how many bloodstains there are. So it's basically saying that, you know, the newspapers are willing to kind of present an image of goodness within the dark for whatever their intentions are. And Satyamurti's narrator is saying, actually, no, that frame does not show the suffering. It does not show the vastness and the scale of the horror. It's a really dark and depressing poem. And on that note, I will say goodbye to you. Thank you so much for watching. If you've got any questions, or if there are any lines of the poem that I didn't go through that you want to steer on, just drop me a line and I will do my best to get back to you. Oh, and do subscribe if you will. That would be super helpful. And you'll also get notifications, obviously, of when my other videos are available for you. Okay, hope that everything's going well with your revision. Happy revising.